You have just listened to the Trumpet Etude number 1, found on page 20 of the Voxman Selected Studies book, like this one that I bought 43 years ago for $2.50. This study is in the key of D major and has the tempo marking of con fuoco, which literally means with fire. I am suggesting metronome marking of eighth note equal 144 to 152 beats per minute. Even though the overall tempo feel of this etude is in a slow 1, where the dotted quarter would get the beat, for accuracy of rhythm, I feel you will be much better off thinking of this etude in a fast 3, where the eighth note will get the beat. This will help you secure your rhythms and coordinate your tongue and fingers much more quickly. This etude is to be played in its entirety, playing from the beginning to the end. There are no errors that I could find, so play this etude as it is written. My performance guide reads as follows. This etude by Böhm should be performed in an exciting, fiery style using a firm articulation while avoiding playing the notes too short. In measures 21, 22, 29, and 30, make sure to observe the diminuendo after the first beat of each measure, avoiding forcing out the high B. The dotted 16th and 32nd note passages aren't to be played with much separation. Playing these in a more melodic, linear way while still keeping the same firmness in the articulation. Avoid playing the 32nd notes too soon, making it sound like a triplet feel. Instead, place the 32nds as close to the following dotted 16ths as possible without changing the rhythm. Fingerings in measures 1, 39, and 55 can be quite awkward. Practice these passages slowly at first. Also, practice playing only the first 5 notes several times before putting it back into context. This forked fingering can be very difficult, but will get easier with consistent practice. Since I've been granted a little more time to cover this in more depth, let's examine a few of these comments in more detail. First, what do I mean by play this etude in an exciting, fiery style with a firm articulation? Well, the dictionary tells us to excite means to arouse or stir up emotions or feelings, and that fiery means to be impassioned, intense, or spirited. What type of music is used to arouse or stir up someone to feel impassioned, intense, and spirited, especially on the trumpet? Well, to me, that's a fanfare. Think of bugle calls that are used to send soldiers into battle. Highly spirited playing motivates the listener into action. That's what we are looking for in this etude. No questions or doubt can be perceived when we play music like this. To not have doubt, we will have to be fully prepared, especially since this etude is difficult and can make even the finest player have doubts about performing it well. To play this with a clear, firm articulation is a must if we want to sound like a fanfare. So consistent daily work on our single tonguing will be necessary to pull this style off. There are plenty of Arbin and other studies that will help you achieve this But you can also just take a simple scale, like your F scale, playing 4/16 notes followed by a quarter note on each pitch of the scale. Make sure you're getting a nice hard tongue at the slow tempo, then speed it up to as fast as you can play it and don't play too staccato. Do this up and down the scale, or even better, several scales, until you can consistently tongue evenly throughout the range of the instrument. Without this technique being sound, you will not be able to play this etude, and definitely not with the confidence necessary to stir someone into battle. This same style carries over to the dotted 16th and 32nd rhythm. This rhythm must be exact and not rounded into a triplet sounding rhythm, or we lose the militaristic sound that a fanfare style calls for. Work for the exact rhythm. This looks harder than it is. Since the eighth note is getting the beat, this sounds just like a dotted eighth and 16th in 4/4 time. But in 3/8 time, it looks twice as fast, but really isn't. It still has to be accurate, however. Most players will play this as a triplet figure. Don't be one of those players. Another thing I mentioned in the performance guide is to work the passage in bar 1 slowly in order to train your fingers. This actually goes for bar 2 as well. This forked fingering is challenging and doesn't just happen without a lot of work. Don't feel that you must keep your little finger on or in the pinky ring. It helps, if it helps to let it fly loosely, let it go. You can put it back after the passage is over. The last thing I'll mention is the passage in bar 21 and 29. Don't force the high B. This note must float out. It does not take more air to play a high B. It's actually the opposite. It's a law of physics. If you force it out, it just sounds ugly. The composer knew what he was doing when he penned the diminuendo in those measures. It's not easy at first, but eventually you'll learn that faster air, which is necessary, isn't the same thing as more air. Think the vowel sound ah on the G, switching to an E vowel on the high B. And that's all for now. Happy practicing. Thanks. That was Trumpet Etude number 2, which can be found on page 8 in the Voxman Selected Studies book. The key is F major and the tempo marking is Adagio cantabile. My suggested metronome marking is 8th note equals 132 to 144, even though a dotted quarter feel is preferred. Due to timing considerations, this etude will be performed from the beginning, but will stop after the first note of measure 39. I found only one error. It is in measure 31, where a natural sign is needed before the D 32nd note, which is on the 4th 8th note beat of that measure, making the last 3 Ds in that measure all natural. My performance guide is as follows. This etude by Duum should be performed in a very singing style with much expression. The sostenuto marking at the beginning means to play each note full value, taking extra care to connect one note to the next. Make sure to show the variations in tempi, including each return to the original tempo. This will help in being fully expressive. Also, work to develop the control necessary to play completely legato in extreme dynamic markings. The ornaments should all occur before the beat and be played quickly while remaining elegant and clear. Measure 35 is written in a quasi-cadenza manner, giving you the freedom to move the tempo as you see fit. Measure 38 is a cadenza. All note values in this measure are suggested and are not to be played exactly in tempo. The goal is to be able to create as much tension and release as possible to enhance the drama and the resolution of the final cadence. Andante cantabile actually means to be performed in a moderately slow tempo and a smooth singing style. Sostenuto means to play each note fully sustained, holding each note for its full value. I would suggest practicing much of this etude slurring at first to get used to not separating the notes at all. Then go back and add articulation, making sure that the tongue does not interrupt the airflow. The opening dynamic of piano doesn't mean to play a particular amount of sound, but a particular quality of sound. In an etude like this, never play so softly that your sound suffers. Instead, always look at making the most resonant sound, but do so only with the warmest tone. This is accomplished by taking nice deep breaths and not putting any pressure or force on the airstream. Just release the air into the instrument, never push the air, let it flow through the horn. Slow air and moist air will give you a cotton-like sound that you will hear that I get when I play this etude. Also make note of the phrasing, which is always important. In this etude, most of the phrases are 4 measures long. Look for one note that is the most important note to aim for in each phrase. Intensify your sound from the beginning of each phrase all the way to the special note, and then relax your sound from there to the end of the phrase. The first phrase of this, I think, peaks on the high G in measure 3. And the second phrase peaks on the F sharp in measure 8. And the third phrase peaks on the C in measure 12. Phrases like that is what music is all about and is a must for this etude. Speed up your tempo a little bit at the piumoso in measure 9. Stay at the slightly faster tempo all the way until the rallentando that is in the end of measure 15. This effect is called rubato, where we steal time and then we give it back. This technique causes a tension and release, which we will need to do more of later at the end of this etude. Return to the beginning tempo in bar 17, where you are asked to play pianissimo. Hold this tempo until the rallentando in measure 27. In this passage, remember that the ornaments come before the beat and need to be executed gracefully and cleanly. Move back to the beginning tempo again in measure 29, and the C sharp trill starts on the C sharp and is between a C sharp and a D natural. Remember in measure 31 to put a natural sign before the first 32nd note D, making those last 3 written Ds in that measure all natural. It was mistakenly left out of the part. Don't forget the rallentando marking in measure 33. It's stuck above the staff and can be easily missed. Notice also that there is no a tempo following. The tempo stays relaxed going into measure 35, and then another rallentando allows for even more slowing. Measure 38, as I said before, is a cadenza. In a cadenza, accidentals do not carry through the measure. They only affect the note that they are in front of. Also, in a cadenza, note values are more of a suggestion than being exact values. And in that general, 30 seconds are faster than sixteenths, sixteenths are faster than eighths, etc. But the rhythms are not to be played exact, and this would sound contrived and mechanical if you did. This is your chance to play with freedom and go with your feelings at the moment. Practice this passage, trying different speeds, emphasizing different notes, etc., until you come up with what you think sounds best. Here, individuality is a good thing. Have fun learning this etude. This is your chance to be a soloist. You have just heard Trumpet Etude number 3, found on page 16 of the Voxman Selected Studies book. It is in the key of B-flat major and has the tempo marking of Allegro Marziale. My suggested metronome marking is quarter note equal 96 to 104. Due to time constraints, play from the beginning to the first note in measure 52. The only errors that I found are in measures 8, 24, and 26, where the fortissimos should be on the fourth beat of the measure. My performance guide is as follows. This etude by Gatti should be performed in a march style using a marked articulation, with extra care being given to emphasizing the extreme contrast and dynamics. This extreme, while very difficult at first, will help you to develop control of your airstream, making you a much more mature musician. The squillante marking means to play with a clear, brilliant, and ringing sound, like the striking of a bell. Also, make note that while all the triplets are marked staccato in this etude, the dotted eighths and sixteenths are not. This is intentional. Do not play the dotted eighth and 16th notes short. If Gatti had wanted this, he would not have written the rhythm as 8th, 16th rest, 16th note later in the etude after we conclude. The biggest challenge on etudes like this is endurance. Not that you can't play through this etude, that you can play through it and still have the control and response to be able to finish with the grace and finesse that Gatti calls for. This is only able to be achieved when a player can comfortably play at extreme dynamics while staying relaxed. While working on this etude, be aware of your body. If you feel tension creeping in, try to dial back on your tension a little each day. There are several ways to check yourself for too much tension. One way is to stop playing right after a difficult spot and without taking a breath, see if you can talk in a normal speaking voice. If you can, great. But if you sound tight and distorted, maybe like this, you're too tense. Another is to stop and take your mouthpiece out of your horn, and you can take the mouthpiece, put it in backwards, and blow very easy, very slow, warm air through the mouthpiece. And this backward mouthpiece direction, and that's how the air in the body literally should feel when we play the instrument. If it doesn't feel that way, then you have too much tension. You can also stop, put your horn in your lap, let your arms hang down to your side, totally relaxed. Roll your head around in a circle like this and just feel that tension roll out of your body. I'm sure there are many more ways that you can come up with, but the main goal is the same. That is to work less by playing in the most relaxed state as possible. Let's now cover a few more specifics about this etude. First, possible issue is not differentiating between a correct dotted eighth rhythm and the dotted eighth 16th figure and a rhythm that aligns more with a triplet. To make sure the dotted eighth and 16th figure is pure, practice the first measure playing 4 16th notes on the B flats, followed by 3 16ths on the F and the following 1 16th note on the D, and repeat it. Something like da 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 dee da 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 dee da, along that line. Play it several times and then play the first measure again as written while thinking those 16th subdivisions in your head. Also avoid playing the dotted eighth notes short. There is no staccato on those notes. However, there are staccatos on the triplets in measure 4. Play those notes with separation, but not too short. It's best to play with a very hard tongue and give the illusion of staccato than to try and play short by stopping the air after each note, which will probably result in cracking most of them. When practicing measures 9, 25, and 27, try and make as much dynamic contrast as you possibly can while maintaining a characteristic sound. At first, the tone may suffer slightly, but you will gain strength in this exercise and will expand your ability to control this larger dynamic spectrum in time. A world of mezzo forte sounds is a pretty boring world, don't you think? Don't forget about the crescendo in measure 30 and to the forte into 31. In the last half of 31, you may want to add a diminuendo into the piano in measure 37. Again, in measures 41 and 42, follow the printed dynamics as much as possible. This is difficult at first, but you will get better at this over time. Especially difficult at measure 42 is playing light and nimble and very soft as the fatigue of this etude is setting in. If you aren't tired at this point, you probably haven't been playing with as wide of a dynamic range as you should. Avoid too much slowing, if any, of the tempo in measure 51, the last measure of this etude. For supplemental practice on dotted eighth and 16th work, I thought of recommending practicing all of the short etudes in the Arbin book on pages 26 and 27. Again, practicing slowly enough to fill in all of the 16th note subdivisions. I'd also recommend moving the accents to the 16th note from the dotted eighth notes. Practice these several times with the subdivisions, then playing them again without the subdivisions, but hearing those subdivisions in your head. Also, for supplemental work on dynamics, you may want to work on the first few studies in the Brandt book if you have it. If not, pull out your trusty Arbin again and turn to pages 32 and 33 to the 6/8 time etudes. In etudes 28 and 29, replace the mezzo piano markings with pianissimo markings and replace the mezzo forte markings with forte or fortissimo markings. Then play etude 30 on page 33 as written, and that should help you master those dynamics changes. Hope that helps. It's been a pleasure putting this together for you all. And again, happy practicing.